if it's comfortable, you can close your outer eyes and just prepare for a time to be. All too often we forget that we are human beings, not human doings. So just be for a few moments. And as we rest our bodies and still our minds, we focus on the breath, to move our consciousness to the breath, to release the splendor of what's inside of us, the knowing of what's inside. So take a deep breath in, and then fully relax. Take another deep breath in as we relax. And then exhale. As you still your body, it's a practice that we know we have a body, yet in this moment we choose not to move the body. We focus on the breath to return our awareness to the breath. If we find a thought drifting by that we attach to, we just release. No judgment, no concern, no worry, just release. And return to the breath. You can search the entire universe for someone more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself. But that person is not to be found anywhere. No one is more deserving of your love and affection than you yourself. Very few of us embrace this kind of self-love, this self-practice. Loving others without any love for ourselves tramples on those healthy boundaries. So in this moment, in these couple moments, just hold this awareness of loving yourself. Love, affection, compassion for yourself. Hold that into your awareness. If these particular phrases that I've used and doesn't resonate within you, you can choose a different version with the same end result of holding compassion for you. Just like our song said in the beautiful brokenness, you wake up every day and see somebody new. The somebody you see new is when you look in the mirror every day and you see someone you can love, hold compassion for, and practice kindness. Starts with yourself. Brene Brown says it's very difficult to even think about holding others that we love tight to us and close to us until we can fully love ourselves. Fully and compassionately accept and know that whatever we've done, whatever's in our past, the light comes in as we accept and love ourselves. You can search the entire universe for someone more deserving of love and affection than you are yourself. But that person is not to be found anywhere. Practice love and kindness and compassion every day for yourself. Breathe that into the deepest recesses of your body and of your being. Breathe it in and then release it and feel that love, that self-love and self-acceptance. as we rest in the silence for just a couple moments, hold this awareness of compassion, self-love, self-compassion, self-acceptance. Hold that into the depth of your being. Again, let every cell and every organ in your body be filled with self-love and self-compassion as we rest in the silence. In the silence. In the silence. So now take a deep breath. Feel that peace that we gain when we just sit for a few moments. And when we allow the experience, whatever it is, when we just sit, whatever it is, without comparing or judging it to what we think it should be, we can have true ease in our being. Just sit and let it be what it is. So now take another breath. Begin to move your body. And when you're comfortable, you can open your outer eyes and be ready to fully engage. Guidepost number 1 from Brene Brown's book, The Gifts of Imperfection. These guideposts, there's 10 guideposts throughout the book. If you followed in the book, if you have, that's great. If you haven't, that's okay too. And they are, as Melissa shared just briefly, there are pathways and practices. Her goal in writing this book was to give us pathways and practices and make it practical to live a life more with joy and love in our life. And that's what this first guidepost is. Cultivating authenticity and letting go of what people think. Boy, that sounds awful easy, doesn't it? That sounds easy, doesn't it? Well, it's not hasn't been my experience for it to be easy. This stirred up a lot of things in me as I read this and as I pray over the words that I put down on paper and what am I going to say, authenticity is not what I thought it would be when I first read this. I should have known better because I've done a lot of work with it. But so when I say authenticity, what is it? What do you think of when you think about you being an authentic person? What do you think about? Is it a person? Is a person either authentic or inauthentic? Is it one or the other? Is it a quality you either have or you don't have? You're lacking in it. Either you're authentic or you're not. So what do you think? What comes to your mind when you think of authenticity? We don't use that word a whole lot, I don't think, being authentic. So we use other words like integrity and trustworthy and things like that, but we don't think about what is authentic, and I'll show you what Brené Brown says about that in a minute. So last week we looked at love and belonging and how she talks about these are essential to our human experience. We're hardwired for these connections. And there's one thing that separates us from feeling this deep sense of love and belonging that we're hardwired for. And that one thing is, yes, it's the belief in our self-worth, our worthiness. So as usual, when I start looking for, doing a talk, I look on the internet, even though Brené Brown's got everything you'd want to know about authenticity. Not probably true, there's other things, but so I Googled on the internet for authenticity, and here's what I found. The thing about quotes from the internet is that it is difficult to define their authenticity. Abraham Lincoln, 1933. I know, it takes a minute to get it. Even when I was reading it takes a minute to get it. The thing about quotes from the internet is that it is difficult to find their authenticity. So I quit looking on the internet because that's so true. I mean, I thought that was just perfect. So in the book, Gifts of Imperfection, these guideposts are an attempt to create a pathway for us to find our way through these journeys of shame, fear, and vulnerability. That's what her research, and if you read more about her research, it's just phenomenal how she does it, what she's done. I got a slide here. Yeah, there it is. And I realized the little design thing broke it up. Wholehearted inventory. This is from the first of the book, but you can go in and take a wholehearted inventory to see where you are about some of these guideposts. It's really interesting. I think I've got a copy of it here, just to let you see what it is. So you'll get a printout like that if you go to her website and say wholehearted inventory. And it's based on the shame research that she's done. And it says letting go of what people think, of perfectionism, it's one of each of the guideposts. And you kind of get it's not a score per se, but a benchmark. It's worth doing. It's free, it's interesting, and you don't even have to enter your email to do it. So it's worth doing. You got to save it and print it out if you want to keep it. So it's a good thing to do. And on her podcast, she talks about this wholehearted inventory. It's a really good thing to do. I enjoyed that, to see where you are in all of these topics here. And I've done it twice, and my answers did change. Once I kind of focus on the book a little bit, it changes. But it's a good thing to do. So at the very first of this chapter, she says, often people attempt to live their lives backwards. They, that meaning we, try to have more things or more money in order to have more of what we want, so they will be happier. So we will be happier. The way it actually works is in reverse. You must first be who you are, then do what you really need to do in order to have what you want. Now that's actually a quote from Margaret Young. So based on Brené Brown's research, authenticity is not something we either have or don't have. Now that's based on her research. It's a practice. Authenticity is a practice. And that's what really got me to thinking during the study of this. It's a conscious choice of how we want to live. Think about that. Whether you're authentic or not. And I'm sure, just mention this because it does me every time I talk about this, I can think of people and put them in categories. Are they authentic? Are they authentic? Even family members. And you can think about traits that some people have and some people don't, that you would start to put them in categories. It's about the choice to show up and be real. That's not easy to do sometimes, especially if we've grown up with shame, fear, and resistance to being vulnerable. In other words, we don't talk about our feelings. I was watching a show the other day about, men particularly have been stereotyped as not talking about their feelings because that's the way we were taught. I think it's changing, but the choice to let our true selves be seen is what being authentic is. It's not about integrity. According to what she's saying about this, about who we are, it's the choice to be seen. Share your story. And there's all kinds of guidelines for how we do that. So some people, again, based on the research, some people are authentic. Some people are not. Again, your mind probably goes right to who's some people that we know. We see so much on social media that you know who's not authentic. And then like most of us, we're somewhere in between. Now what does that mean? The shame triggers, shame and fear and lack of vulnerability leads us to self-doubt, stress, or as I put it, just plain beating yourself up. And I started using beating the S word out of yourself, just unmercifully beating ourselves up. And it's driven by what we call this the shadow side, these feelings from the shadow side, particularly shame. I'm grateful that most days I don't have to be anyone but me. I haven't always lived that way. While it's taken me years, literally years, I have developed some shame resilience, as she calls it, to avoid crawling in the shame-created hole. That's the shame-created hole. And then all of us, well, I'll just speak for me, have these periods where we go in, whether it's depression or anxiety or whatever it is, where we hit these low spots. And it's okay as long as we don't furnish it and move in. So these shame-based places but it can still happen, and that's Renee talks about that in her life. So she had a awakening. She called it a breakdown, and in the book she'll scratch out breakdown and say spiritual awakening as a result of doing this work. Changed her whole life. So anytime somebody is overcritical about how I live, about how you live, or how I spend my time, or how I shouldn't do this instead, I can revert to a feeling less than of who I know I really am. The criticism can still hurt, even though we're authentic and we're putting on our best face. We still have feelings about it. But no one can beat me, because no one can beat me up better than I can beat myself up. So where did this come from? Well, a lot of it came from my mom. This is not going to be a session about beating up your parents, but she was a big part of this, along with just the overriding judgment in connection with the teachings of the rigid rules of the fundamentalist evangelical church I grew up in. Shame, self-doubt, unworthiness can all kick in, and these feelings of unworthiness and shame can kick in. So most of this I relate to, just growing up and feeling shame about everything. And if you remember last week, I talked about shame is the difference between shame and guilt. I did have a slide for that, but I took it out. Just thinking, let me get this right here. So I want to read it, just what I wrote. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. I did something bad. It's a behavior. Guilt is a behavior. And shame is about who I am. Guilt can be just as powerful as shame, but its effect is often positive, because if you do something that you're guilty about, it's a behavior, you can usually change it. So I wondered, as I was thinking of this, does every generation of you think they are owed a lifestyle as their parents, or is that something that's happened recently? I know I didn't grow up thinking that. Maybe because we didn't have a whole lot. Maybe that's the difference. Social media has a big part of that. But I think it's created, and she refers to it in the book, it's created these situations of shame and guilt, and fear, and unworthiness, and not being vulnerable, not wanting to talk about our shortcomings. It seems to be turning around. These later generations of young people seem to be saying it's okay, because what she says in the book is, and what that song we play, I asked Melissa to play that song about beautiful brokenness, is how the light gets in. We're imperfect. We're imperfect, and yet we're wired for struggle, and yet we are owed and deserve to be loved and to belong. Perfectly imperfect is the way I like to say it. So for people who live in this, where they're trying to hide their real self, it can be exhausting. If you've had any period of your life where you could not show your real self because you were worried about, as she says in the title of this chapter, worried about what other people think or feel about you, it's exhausting. I mean, it is absolutely exhausting. And we live in a culture where approval of the right house, the right job, the right friends, the right weight, buying and wearing the right clothes, etc., 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 are the things that we seem to gravitate to because of the culture. That's where we spend our focus, is on these things of the culture and not on what's inside of us. Being in a culture that is to fit in makes the idea of being authentic and vulnerable a very large task. Very large task. Authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. We're not supposed to be following some standard social media norm. Who are we supposed to be? We learned this from our 5 principles. Who are we? So here's what she says. Choosing authenticity means this: cultivating the courage to be imperfect, to set boundaries, and to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Exercising the compassion that comes from knowing that we are all made of strength and struggle. It's a both and. And then nurturing the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe we are enough. When we believe we are enough. So, when I'm doing these, I instantly think of we talk about the 5 principles as a way of life. Which principle comes to your mind when I read those definitions that Renee has in her book about authenticity? What is that? Anybody got an idea? I'm springing it on you. 5th principle. Clearly, it's the 5th principle. We always think that when we say that, knowing and understanding the laws, these laws, is about living the truth we know. What about living the truth that we know who we are? That's what we're trying to do with the 5th principle. Being authentic is living the truth that we know who we are. If we have ups and downs and shortcomings and periods where we're, again, furnished it, we have it, that's true, we just don't move in. So on our table in the lobby, there is a round table, and some of you may know it came from the youth group over it was in the youth department over at the Lisenby. I was sitting out there. I was here most of the day on Thursday for World Day of Prayer. Matter of fact, I plan right now, a year advance, plan right now to be here for the World Day of Prayer because it was really good. And thank you for all of you guys that showed up to participate. It was really good. The program that Unity Worldwide Headquarters put on was really good, really special. But anyhow, I was sitting out there in between looking at a book in the library, the lending library, and I found these two quotes written on this table. When we are authentic, yeah, go figure. When we are authentic, we demonstrate honesty and transparency. This allows us to live our principles and achieve our highest potential. We live the truth we know and progress with integrity. So I just thought it was amazing that I would sit down and see these quotes about authenticity, being authentic, on that table. Those are probably generated at least 20 years ago, probably longer. So again, I said it's exhausting sometimes to live outside of the integrity of who we are. It's especially exhausting for addicts and alcoholics because they are incapable, for the most part, of being authentic, incapable of telling the truth, incapable of being vulnerable. Can't do it. I mean, it'd be like cutting off an arm if somebody's in active addiction to admit that they have a problem and can't be vulnerable. But it's not just addicts and alcoholics that have this. Richard Rohr calls addiction probably the best word in the parallel in the Bible about sin. Everywhere there's a word sin, think of addiction. And it's not addiction to drugs or alcohol. It's addiction to the way we think. The sin or addiction of having to tell the truth, of being vulnerable. Instead of attempting to hide ourselves and hide what's inside of us, addicts and alcoholics, and most of us can't do that or have trouble doing it. Authenticity demands wholehearted living and loving, even when it's hard to do, even when we have to wrestle with shame and fear of not being good enough, especially when the joy is so intense that we're afraid to let ourselves feel it. A lot of times, if we're feeling good, we have a hard time being vulnerable because we don't want to spoil it. So it's a journey. As I said last week, this is a spiritual journey, an inward journey we're on. The inward journey, among other things, is a spiritual journey. Meditation and prayer is essential. Audacity of authenticity. So how can we say that we're authentic without sometimes getting a sense of self-indulgence or self-focused, almost a perceived selfishness or narcissism? I think the metaphor we use in Unity about recognizing ourselves as a wave on the ocean, we're all of God, not all. We're all God, not all of God. If you use that metaphor or breath or whatever of the ocean, the metaphor is that we are a wave on the ocean. We are all God, not all of God. And as soon as we recognize that, we look around and we see the other waves, the other manifestations of the one. So it becomes a very humbling experience, at least it does for me, when we say that we're a wave on the ocean. And for me, it's always humbling, and there's no selfishness or narcissism present, at least in me. Now, I will admit, being authentic is, I've started off saying it's not easy because it's not the safe option. Telling the truth of who you are, of who we are. And again, in the front of the book, but be careful who you do that with. Choose who you tell your story to. Don't just do it. Don't just do it to anybody. Listen to what your gut's telling you to do, who to share it with. And it's all too easy to criticize somebody while they're taking a risk, where they're risk-taking, voicing an unpopular opinion, or sharing a new creation, or trying something you haven't quite mastered yet. That's risky. Attacking and criticizing today, is especially anonymously, is kind of the de facto standard on social media. You can say anything you want to say about anybody, what they're doing or what they think, and the technology just makes it so easy to do that. She calls that the ultimate chicken BS, being a chicken, because you don't do it, you don't take ownership of it. So the risk of practicing authenticity can feel like hard work, physical, emotional, and spiritual work. We talk about that. That's why we're doing this, our whole self. It's the risk of putting your true self out in the world. I'll have to tell you this analogy, and then we'll close in just a second. It's like warning on a pack of cigarettes. She said should come on a pack of cigarettes, just like on us. If you trade in your authenticity for being liked, for just being what you want somebody to think about you, you may experience the following. Anxiety, depression, eating disorders, addiction, rage, blame, resentment, and inexpressible grief. So that needs to be a qualification on each one of us. So what's the bottom line? Sacrificing who we are for the sake of what other people think just isn't worth it. It's not worth it. It took me years to do that. I had to wear the right tie, the right shirt, the right shoes. Part of that comes from being older, but part of it becomes practicing authenticity of who I am. At the very end of every post that she did, the guidepost in the book, Brene Brown suggests that we dig deep again, do the work. She called it 3 categories: get deliberating, get inspirational, and get going. So she has a few of those, and we'll talk about those maybe on the other ones later. But I found this quote from Ernest Holmes that says, "You are to believe with utmost simplicity and with complete faith that there is a pattern of your being, a real spirit of you, which is as eternal as God, this spirit of you, this idea of you, as indestructible as reality itself, and as changeless as truth." So make authenticity your number one goal, to practice authenticity, being authentic. Wherever you go into a situation where you are feeling vulnerable, find you a mantra or something that you can hold on to. Hold on to that so that you know that you are real, the real truth about yourself, but keep it real. So as I did last week, let's pause for just a moment to pray, to close this out with a prayer. So I invite you just to be grateful for these insights that have come from these lessons that Brene Brown's been teaching us about wholehearted living. And yet, if anything that I've said today or anything that you've heard from these books has triggered anything in you, any emotion of shame or fear or resistance to vulnerability, these are powerful objects in our life. So today I pray for the courage to do what is ours to do. If anything has triggered you in any way, it may be expressed as sadness, anxiety, stress, or anger. Or, on the opposite, you may have discovered something to celebrate. So if you have, may I have the courage to share our story with another safe person, so that we don't take these feelings and shove them down and let them bury and come out at a later date. So if you have any triggers or any of that, feel free to pray with me or our prayer team. Just let's talk about these feelings that you're having. So in the name and after the power of the living Christ within, we say thank you, thank you, God. Amen. Namaste.
Reverend Ron, very, very authentic talk today. And thank you so much for the meditation as well. And we're going to close our service today like we always do. Let's gather in a big circle to sing our peace song. And remember to hang out afterwards. We have food today. Yeah. All right, we're almost in our circle. All right. And cue the music.